Kyle, I've been looking through your recent testimony to the Texas Senate, and frankly, it's hair raising. And just let me see if I've got this straight, okay? So you've got a former People's Liberation Army general billionaire who has bought over 130,000 acres of Texas land, including a giant wind farm in an area where there isn't particularly a lot of wind, that happens to be right beside a very sensitive U.S. military installation.
Yeah. So, first of all, it's kind of hard to believe that we're talking about this and that it actually happened. But it's already happened. I was flying down to the Devils River area of Texas. When you think about the Texas map, it's the southern region of Texas where the bend is, essentially. It's just south of where that bend is, and it's right on the U.S. border with Mexico, which also you didn't mention, but is actually functionally relevant or germane to this conversation, and we'll get to why. But one of the other things you didn't mention is there was a 4,000 or 5,000 foot runway there where the Chinese general's expanding it to, we think, 10,000 feet. I flew over and took pictures, which I'll happily share with you. But this is happening inside the United States, and this general is actually interfacing directly with the critical infrastructure of the United States, i.e., my view, and this is my view only, not our country's view yet, but my view is that the reason that he bought the wind farm and wants to put up 700-foot turbines is he plugs directly into our electric grid. Well, plugging directly into our electric grid is something that should never happen. Whether you're from a Chinese general or a North Korean general or an Iranian general or a Russian general, you should be precluded from buying property next to our busiest Air Force training base and plugging directly into our grid. So I was flying to that area of Texas, and the person that picked me up at the landing strip was taking me to look at some properties out there. And he casually pointed across the front of the cab and pointed at the gate and said, that's where the Chinese headquarters in Texas happens to be. And I said, excuse me? And I thought he was kidding, of course. And he said, no, that's where they're building their main facility and the runway for their big wind farm project down here. And I said, stop the car. And he said, no. They have cameras everywhere. They'll come after me. And I said, we're in Texas. Stop the car. No one's coming after you here. And he was generally frightened that I forced him to stop the car in front of this gate. The insidious nature of what's going on, believe it or not, I have photos of me standing at the gate. The name of this piece of property that is their headquarters is called the Morningstar Ranch. And if you remember in the Bible, the devil's name is Lucifer Morningstar. And you should see the obtuse star that denotes the landmark of this ranch. It's just, again, it's almost like made for TV fiction. You couldn't make this up if you tried. But anyway, I investigated and realized that, on a scale of 1 to 10, the wind assets in that region of the United States and southern Texas is like between a 2 and a 3 out of 10. And if you and I were investing and buying big wind turbines and wanted to put them somewhere, Jan, we'd look for two things. We would look for major wind factors, and then we'd also look for transmission equipment to be able to transmit it somewhere to sell it. We would never build a wind farm where this one is. And so there's a strategic reason this general has acquired all of this land. And he did it, again, in an insidious way. He got a local businessman out of Lufkin, Texas, to front for him and purchase all the properties. So none of the landowners knew they were selling to a Chinese general. And then in all one fell swoop, he flipped it to the general. 130,000 acres, to put that into context, is 200 square miles. Right? Just think about that for a second. 200 square miles of property. We have a Chinese general who owns 2/3 of the real estate in the capital of Xinjiang, where the concentration camps are for the ethnic Uyghurs. And, he now owns 200 square miles of Texas land between one of our most active Air Force bases and the border of the US and Mexico.
So before we continue, I wanted to tell everybody about our premier digital video platform, Epoch TV. That's where you can find all our exclusive content as well as the full episodes. You can subscribe at epochtv.com/ATL. I'm sure for everyone who's listening, I imagine this can be very, very hard to believe. I remember in the testimony, I mean, when I read the part that his interests control 2/3 of the capital of Xinjiang's real estate market. I mean, how can you even imagine that this person isn't deeply, deeply connected to the Chinese Communist Party?
I mean, he has 6,000 CCP members that work for him. His two closest advisors are also ex-PLA generals. He runs 40 local branches of the CCP, grassroots branches. I mean, we've done some investigations into this General Soon, and it's hard to believe, but it's happening. And when you see this runway expansion, you wonder why on earth. I mean, it looks like one of those runways on the islands of the South China Sea. All the islands that China claimed they would never militarize. Right? Xi Jinping said to President Obama, "We'll never militarize those islands." The next thing you know, they've got missile batteries and fighter jets and bombers on these 10,000-foot runways.
Well, and so tell me the significance of having such a large runway, private runway in the middle of Texas. Like, is it common to have runways like this for people to have such runways like this across the country?
So in remote areas of the United States, people that have large land holdings will sometimes build their own landing strips. The enormity of this particular strip is a head scratcher because you can land just about every single, even very large private plane on a runway that's 6,000 feet long or less. My pilots decided that said that this runway looked like it was about 10,000 feet long. So it was abnormally large. But again, why are we allowing people from China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea to build runways in the United States next to our border or next to our air bases? They are 10 miles from this air base. 10 miles is nothing. Think about in an airplane, in an airplane traveling 600 miles an hour. How long does it take to go 10 miles? Literally a handful of seconds. So I think it's relevant. I don't know the full relevance. I truly don't know the full relevance of the runway, other than it doesn't make any sense. But the relevance of the wind farm is, again, it interfaces and plugs directly into Texas's power grid. And everyone's aware of what happened in January with the Texas power grid, and how Texas is the only state that runs its own grid, right? The United States has a purview or regulatory oversight over the rest of the grids. Texas happens to be proud of their grid, and it doesn't want the U.S. interfering with their grid, and yet we have a Chinese PLA general plugging directly into our grid. Now, there's plenty of instances of malware. If you look at the GAO report that was recently released that I included as a footnote in my testimony, we are fully certain that the Chinese and the Russians, the North Koreans and Iranians want to disrupt our critical infrastructure. We are certain that they want to do that and that they have the capacity to do it. We mustn't ever allow them to interface directly with these things, whether it is our layer one phone system, layer one phone interconnections on the telco side, or whether it's our waste and water treatment systems, or our nuclear power systems, our nuclear power plants, or our electric grids. We just need to keep them out. It's a basic understanding of how you protect national security. And so it's just fascinating to me to see kind of how this sausage is made, and how GH America got formed, and how he was able to buy all of these properties. He still owns these properties as we sit here today, Jan. Now, this bill went through both the House and the Senate in Texas, and to put it under context, after the Senate bill testimony was heard, I brought General Spalding and Patrick Genovine, who beat Avick in court to testify with me. We passed 31-0. So we got every Republican and every Democrat to agree that this was a bad idea.
Hey, thanks for watching American Thought Leaders. As you're probably well aware, big tech has been censoring a lot of content on its platforms, including some American Thought Leaders episodes, including some other Epoch Times content. Now, to deal with this, we've actually launched a new video platform, Epoch TV. Epoch TV is our premium platform for digital video content. It's got American Thought Leaders, it's got Facts Matter with Roman Balmakov, The Larry Elder Show, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, and frankly, this is our contribution, if you will, to the uncensored media landscape, which is something we really, really need in this country and around the world, frankly. To subscribe, epochtv.com/ATL. Go to epochtv.com/ATL or hit the link below.